Okay, guys, let's talk about political culture. So, what is political culture? These are the views about how government should function and its guiding principles. Americans don't usually agree on much, a rule of thumb there, but one thing we can agree on are these core values, and they are individualism, equal opportunity, free enterprise, rule of law, and limited government. So, let's talk about each one of these individually. Individualism, the idea that people should be responsible for themselves and the decisions that they make. Conservatives would argue that government should not intervene with individualism, that the less the better. Don't feed the wild animals, otherwise they're going to get hooked on the human food and hooked on to that support rather than hunting for themselves. And that's the idea here. If the government starts providing and providing and providing for the individual, that spirit, that rugged individualism that helped make America what it is today through westward settlement and whatnot will disappear. While liberals will say, you know what, we need a certain amount of government assistance, and that won't hurt individualism at all, but it's necessary to break things like the cycle of poverty and discrimination. And here's a nice little map for you. Go ahead and take a moment and look that over. You can see here the chances, the opportunities that a child makes it from the bottom fifth socioeconomically to the top fifth, meaning that by the time that they are 30, they're making $70,000 a year. By the time they're 45, they're making $100,000 a year from poverty. So you can see which states tend to be struggling in this area, which states tend to do well. So the Southeast is not doing so well, but the Midwest doing pretty good. Equal opportunity. Every person should have a chance to succeed. Do not get this confused with the equal outcome. All right. Everybody has an equal opportunity to succeed. That does not mean that every person is going to have the same success. So conservatives would argue that affirmative action is not an appropriate way to ensure that every person has an equal opportunity, because they feel that this is actually reverse racism. While liberals feel that things like affirmative action programs are actually essential to provide that equal opportunity. Free enterprise. Now, free enterprise is the idea that economic activity should be mostly controlled by citizens, not government. If you reflect back to last semester, this is your invisible hand. Let self-interest and guide our decisions, not the government. Conservatives believe that too much regulation will actually hurt business growth, while liberals feel that regulation is necessary to protect consumers and workers. Think Upton Sinclair, the jungle, that kind of stuff. Now, conservatives would definitely are in favor of regulation. They just don't want too much regulation. Rule of law. No one is above it. All right, no one is above the law. Conservatives are more support of more powerful enforcement. They want to really crack down on crime and have harsher punishments, while liberals favor harsher laws dealing with businesses and want to make sure that the rights of the accused are protected. Limited government. And this is the idea that government should not restrict civil liberties, our most important core value here. Conservatives feel that judges should follow strict constructionism when looking at the civil liberties, meaning that they need to interpret these things literally, while liberals would say, loose construction is best, where they can be looking at the intent of the law rather than just the literal form of the law. So if you think back to the Lilly Ledbetter case, that's a great situation that shows the differences of strict constructionism versus loose constructionism. Here you have the Civil Rights Act of 1964, specifically Title VII, which states that wage discrimination is against the law. Lilly Ledbetter is paid discriminated wage by Goodyear Tire. But in that law, there's a statute of limitations. And that statute question was, when does that start? When you find out about the discrimination, or when the first paycheck started with that? And the way the law was written, Lilly Ledbetter lost her case because of the statute of limitations. That's if you're using strict constructionism, while judges who would be using loose constructionism would say, well, the intent of the law would actually favor Lilly Ledbetter. So you have your differences of opinion there. Then you also have the issues of civil liberties when they can and cannot be restricted. Conservatives would be more in favor of national security being a compelling interest to limit civil liberties, while liberals would be a little bit more hesitant to take that approach. All right, now, how do people acquire their political ideologies? How do people develop their feelings on politics? And there's several sources we'll look at here. The most obvious and the greatest of those is the family unit. All right, you spend so much time with your family, they're going to have a major impact on how you feel about politics. School's another one. We indoctrinate you to social norms. Raise your hand before you talk. Hey, look me in the eyes when you're talking to me. Da 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 da. So we'll help with that, those social norms there. And the higher up in education you go, the more impact those professors and teachers can have on your political involvement and thought. Peers is the second greatest impact. Excuse me. So peers, these are your friends, the people you hang out with. Their thinking is going to rub off on you as well. The life cycle effect. This is the concept that the older you get, the more conservative you are, and the younger you are, the more liberal you are. And this is a great graph here. You can see here, this is for those who favor same-sex marriage by the generation. All right. And you can see here that millennials are actually at the top of this graph, meaning that millennials are much more likely to favor same-sex marriage, while the oldest generation, the silent generation, is at the very bottom. And it does flow exactly as such as it's labeled up here, which really just kind of shows you that this is pretty much accurate. Now, it's not accurate for every person, but generally speaking. Then you have the generational effect. And what that's saying is, like, sometimes there's these major historical events, these watershed moments that can really impact how people feel about political issues. 9/11 is a great example. I was in college when that happened. A lot of people my age are more favor of government surveillance to eliminate and protect us against terrorism than somebody perhaps your own age who was either too young or not alive when 9/11 occurred. And so therefore not as much of a influence on you. Media. This one's debatable. We'll look at this in closer detail in another chapter. But the question becomes, does the media impact your views, or do we seek out the media that already pushes the views that we agree with? Right? Are we creating these echo chambers? And last but not least, globalization. Globalization has made this a very complex process because of things like the internet and cell phones, faster travel. Views from around the world are in our daily conversations now, and they're affecting how we feel about things like European healthcare systems and European socialism, whether or not that should be something that we should be getting ourselves involved in. And this is something that the next presidential election you're going to hear a lot of. So it's having a really interesting impact on how we view politics today, this whole globalization prospect. Okay, guys, that's it for today. I hope that this was helpful, and good luck on your quiz.